We're living in an extraordinary time. First, a pandemic lockdown in March, followed by unprecedented protests and unrest in the streets in June, demanding that Black lives matter. How will our democracy hold up under this pressure? And will Election Day feel the stresses? Please welcome the author of Give Us the Ballot, Ari Berman, and activist and organizer Angela Lang, founder of Black Leaders Organizing Communities, direct from Milwaukee, as they delve into Vote Safe 102, COVID-19 and the stress test on democracy.
Hi, everyone. I am Ari Berman, senior reporter for Mother Jones, author of the book Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America, and I am thrilled to be joined tonight by Angela Lang in Milwaukee. Hi, Angela. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can get into all the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah. Hi, Ari. Thanks for having me. I am Angela Lang. I am the executive director of Black Leaders Organizing for Communities, which was founded in November of 2017, really as a response to the 2016 election and really dedicated to being a year-round civic engagement organization, specifically targeted at Black folks that typically are left out of the political process.
So I want to start with your home state, Angela, which always gets a lot of attention, Wisconsin, but it got a lot of attention during the primaries. There was a really unprecedented election in April where Wisconsin was one of the only states that didn't push back its primary in the midst of coronavirus. We saw major voting issues in your hometown of Milwaukee. The number of polling places went from 180 to 5. There were very long lines, particularly in Black neighborhoods. So I was hoping you could just tell us, what was that experience like for you, for voters in Milwaukee, for voters in Wisconsin, and what did you take away from that experience? What did you learn going forward?
Yeah, I think the only way to really describe the days leading up to that election was chaos. Deadlines were changing, rules were changing. Is there a postmark date for me to mail in my ballot, or is there not? Is the election even happening? And so the Thursday before the election, normally we're gearing up, doing the final push, saying, hey, vote for this candidate or vote for that candidate. And we found ourselves really troubleshooting and getting out the information about all the changing rules, the deadlines. I even had friends come up to me, and I'm their political friend, so they're inboxing me and they're like, wait, do we have to, mail our ballots by this time? What happens if I didn't get my ballot by election day? What do I have to do? So it was really, really hard. And I think it was really confusing for a lot of voters. And, we did everything that we could. We laid it all on the table. We, urged the governor to delay the in-person votes. We signed on to lawsuits and did a litigation strategy as well. And we did everything that we could. And unfortunately, we ended up having the in-person election. I remember thinking I thought I made peace with it the night before of like, okay, it is what it is. Let's just, move forward. And I just remember on election day, waking up at about 7:15, and like a good millennial, I scrolled social media and my whole feed was just all pictures of people standing in long lines, disabled people talking about they didn't know if they could stand in those lines physically for 2+ hours. There were elderly people in walkers. There, just seeing the anger and the frustration was really devastating. And I think if there is a silver lining out of this, we now know that our community knows more about how to register to vote online, how to request a ballot and vote by mail. I think a lot of people didn't know that that was an option. Typically, 10 to 12% of total votes cast are absentee. This time around, it was in the 70s. It was 70+% of all total votes cast were absentee. So we're really just trying to get the word out to let people know, request your ballot now. So hopefully it comes in time. Let's kind of troubleshoot some of these issues now ahead of our August election. We're not just gearing up for November, but we have an election on August 11th. And so we want to make sure that people understand how to cast their ballot safely. And then we're also, gearing up and we're pursuing litigation as well. We were able to take the foundation of what happened on April 7th and go back and work with groups and different individual plaintiffs, but specifically Disability Rights Wisconsin. We teamed up and our plaintiffs on a lawsuit to hopefully make sure that there's mechanisms and education campaigns in place so people know about the polling places. They know what the plan is going to be heading into November.
So you do a lot of community organizing. I've been to your headquarters in Milwaukee. I've seen your work. You like to talk face-to-face to people in the community. How has coronavirus made that harder? And how have you guys adjusted your strategies as a result?
Yeah, it's tough. On March 16th, we had a staff meeting and we made the decision that we would shut down our office effective March 18th. So we had about 48 hours to completely uproot our program. The beginning of March, we had just hired 17 new people to knock on doors. And so by the time we shut down, we had 50 people ready to knock on doors. And those extra 17 people, after their training, they never got a chance to knock on doors because we shut down. And so we had to, get programs like virtual phone banks and Hustle to text, all of which I'm familiar with, but we've never done as an organization because our bread and butter is our field program. So we had to quickly teach everybody how to use Zoom, how to use conference calls, how to use the texting software, and how to virtual phone bank. And so it was a bit of an adjustment. There's some technological gaps as well. There's information gaps. So it was tough to reach out to folks, but it allowed us to get creative. We have a program called a Silent Canvas where candidates and elected officials are able to shadow and hear stories from the fields. And that's a part of our endorsement process. And we had to figure out how do we still make sure they're interacting with our community. So we shifted to virtual town halls with candidates. We're thinking about all the ways that we can get out information in a digital sense and still being old fashioned and texting and phone banking. And even in some cases, we're thinking about just dropping literature at people's doors saying, hey, we missed talking to you in the field. Here's some really important information for you. We hope to be back soon. But in the meantime, stay connected with us virtually. So it's been an adjustment, but I'm really happy to say that leading up to the election, we were able to make almost 35,000 phone calls and sent almost 82,000 text messages. So we were able to really try to just disperse as much information as possible and keep people up to date. And we're looking to continue to do that and also find other ways to get creative digitally too.
Have you gone back out in the field yet to knock on people's doors?
We have not, unfortunately, and we're all really, really anxious to do so. We know some other groups have started to knock as well, but we're also starting to see trends and spikes continue to happen, all across the country, but here in Wisconsin as well. The percentages of cases that come back positive tend to rise, and we're seeing that in the last week or so. And so we didn't want to go back to the office too early when Wisconsin was starting to open up. Because I feel like it was opening up more so on a political stance and not from a health perspective. And so we wanted to make sure, given the community that we work in, specifically the Black community, which is disproportionately impacted by the virus, we wanted to make sure everyone's safe. But we're in the process of getting masks made with our logo on it. So we're hoping to go back out on doors at some point, and we're working directly with the health department on when it's safe to do so. But we're really eager to just, get back in the field and just try to make some tweaks and adjustments. And maybe you knock on someone's door and then you step away, you step down the stairs and you're having that conversation that way. So we just want to make sure our first priority is to keep everyone safe. But we're really, really anxious to be back out in the field.
And tell us about what's happening with voter registration. One really disturbing statistic I've seen is that in a bunch of really important states, places like Georgia and Texas and Virginia and North Carolina, voter registration is way down. I've talked to voter registration groups across the country that had to suspend their in-person registration work because of coronavirus. So I'm just wondering, how has it been in Wisconsin? What are you doing in terms of registration? And I imagine millions of new people are going to want to participate in the process this year. So how are you trying to engage those new people?
Yeah, I mean, we see it as, kind of a 1-2 conversation about making sure that people are registered. If they need to register, being able to walk them through that over the phone or via text message, being able to help people navigate that process. And then also saying, great, now that you're registered, request your ballots. So we're able to have all of those conversations. We're concerned about, having people being purged from voter rolls. We're being concerned about all of those different tactics. And so we actually are launching our third fellowship program. We do a fellowship program every year. And this one in particular is going to be focused around voter registration. So our fellowship program will have 15 people. The first session will be at the mid-July. And instead of just learning just the basics of civics and the basics of organizing, they're going to get those skills, but they'll also have 3 hours of what we call field work, which will now be a little bit more virtual. But their 3 hours of field work is going to be dedicated to getting out information about how to register to vote, and then absentee voting as well. So we're incorporating that into our programs. We still have ambassadors who are getting constantly trained. Our organizer, she physically has been walking people through how to register to vote in a lot of different cases. So we're making that a really big priority because we know some of the challenges and obstacles, whether it be people being purged from the voter rolls, voter registration, just not understanding how to upload a picture of your ID. We were getting reports that people were taking selfies instead of uploading pictures of their ID. So really doing everything that we can on that technical aspect to make sure that people have everything that they need. And we're doing this sooner rather than later. So if there are any issues, we can troubleshoot it way in advance before Election Day.
How do you think the protests over the killing of George Floyd and many other Black men and women have changed awareness around the election? Has it made people more aware of the stakes of the election? What do you see as the connection between this really unprecedented moment that we're in around racial justice, and how does that connect to the 2020 election?
Yeah, I think Donald Trump is inserting himself into the narrative by him tweeting about shooting protesters. I think that is really kind of shaping how people are feeling about the election. I think, the fact that people are looking for leadership from the commander-in-chief, people are looking for unity, some sort of just affirmations that we're going to be okay as a country. People are looking for that comfort. And I think people have really strong feelings about how this president is responding to this moment or not responding in some cases. And so I think what I'm seeing is that there's kind of like two camps of people. There are people that said, everybody that is protesting, let's register them to vote. Let's, take clipboards and register them. And then there are some people that are angry and are sitting in this anger, and rightfully so, and may not even be thinking about the election. And so we want to be careful of how we're able to, continue this momentum and really paint this picture about the intersection of the failure of this administration when it comes to criminal justice and what that means for November. But if people feel very strongly that they are toppling statues or burning down buildings, people may not be at this moment where they think that voting is important. If you are pushed to that moment in a protest, the furthest thing from your mind may not, may be voting, right? And so we don't want to, try to capitalize off of this moment, but I think there's ongoing conversations that need to continue to be had. And I think, again, our folks, even particularly when we're debriefing what we're seeing in current events, a lot of our folks are like, great, let's keep the same energy in November. But I think a lot of the comments that are coming out of Twitter from the president's account really is not making it easier for people to want to support him. And I think people feel very strongly about making sure that their voice is heard come November.
I think you made a really interesting point about conversations that people are having about voting, because there are people that are skeptical about voting. And they say, we've gone out and voted and we're still being killed in the streets or in our homes. And so there's a skepticism about what does voting get us? So, I've devoted my life to writing about voting rights. You've devoted your life trying to increase political participation. What do you say to people that wonder, why should I vote?
Yeah, I mean, I get that question a lot. There are times I've knocked on doors, even on election day, and I'm like, hey, you got 4 more hours to vote. Are you voting? And they're like, no, like there's no reason for me to vote. My life isn't going to change. And for a second, it's always just really disappointing. But I also have to kind of shift my thinking and be like, you know what? I understand if people haven't seen tangible results out of a system that they've already participated in, why should they continue? And we have to be honest when we're talking about voting, that voting is not going to be the silver bullet. Voting is not going to be the end all be all, that once we all vote for a particular candidate, there's going to be this magic wand that waves and everything is suddenly great. And so we're having honest conversations with people that we understand people's skepticism of why they don't want to participate politically, but we also want to use every tool in our toolbox, every tool in our arsenal, and voting is just one tactic. But voting in combination with year-round organizing is really how you get that level of accountability and how you're able to get that change. And so we tell people, like, yes, vote, use every tactic that you can, but really, to me, it comes down to organizing. Even if people are just elected on election night, we don't want people to be too comfortable for too long. Like don't rest on that victory, because the next day you're gonna get a phone call from our team, asking about what your agenda is. How can we help you? How can we continue to have an open line of communication and collaborate and work together? And I think that's where that real power is. But we have to start by electing the right people. And even if people don't agree with the candidates, we have to really put in perspective that at the end of the day, there are two candidates. And when polls close and the numbers are being tallied, one of them is going to win. Who do we want to organize under and feel is movable? And I think it's a broader conversation about how we're building power and how voting is part of a civic engagement process, but not completely all of it.
What do you think turnout's going to be like in November among young people and communities of color? And what do you think are the most important things we can do to encourage those communities to go vote?
Yeah, people ask all the time, do I think, turnout is going to increase from 2016? I do. I think there has been a lot of great, amazing infrastructure that has been built since the 2016 election. There's been really amazing groups that have been also doing year-round organizing, including Leaders Igniting Transformation, LIT. They target youth of color. So they've been in high schools working with youth of color in high schools and all across the state on different college campuses. And they had a really big win last week at the school board and got the school board to sever a contract with the police department. And so seeing young people in high school, I'm so excited for young people and youth of color and how they're showing up in these spaces, how they're getting creative and using social media platforms to literally take down, campaign events. I think it's really fascinating to watch. And I'm actually really excited for youth of color. So I do think that they're getting more and more involved and more active. They're sure getting more involved than I was at that age. I started organizing when I was 18. You're seeing, 15, 16-year-olds organizing, and I'm really excited to see their leadership. And I think people are seeing this as a moment for young folks. And I think also people of color in general who may be a little bit older, I think people have really, really strong feelings about what happened the last 4 years. And I think people want to make sure that they're voting come November. But I think also at the same time, people want to use the power that they have and the lessons learned from 2016, that you're just not automatically going to get our votes as a Black or brown person. You still need to earn them and really be engaging in a really intentional way. So I think in order for us to take the lessons learned from 2016, it comes down to engagement, it comes down to trust, it comes down to building relationships and making sure that people are listening. People ask what, candidates can do. Candidates just need to listen to people on the ground and then being able to respond to the stories that they're hearing through their campaign messages, through their campaign plans that they're putting out, through being able to create an agenda. I think people want to feel that their issues are being reflected and will be worked on and are going to be a priority once people are elected.
How do we better educate people about voting by mail? You mentioned that a lot of people voted by mail in Wisconsin, and the statistics are pretty amazing. Only 6% of Wisconsinites voted by mail in 2018. 60% of Wisconsinites voted by mail in the April primary. So, to go from 6% to 60% is extraordinary. I imagine in November, an even higher percentage potentially could vote by mail. That's what I'm hearing from election officials around the country, that they think that 2/3 of people could vote by mail in some of these swing states, obviously more in places like Oregon and Washington, where everyone votes by mail. So I wanted to ask you about that. What can we do to encourage people to vote by mail? Wisconsin in particular also has some restrictive requirements when it comes to voting by mail. Things like you need to get a witness to see you fill out your ballot, things like that, that could deter participation. So just want to talk about how to encourage vote by mail, and then also get beyond some of the restrictions that could potentially persuade people not to vote by mail.
Yeah, I think that's a big question that we're trying to solve in this this pending lawsuit. We want to make sure that there is a plan. Is that restriction about having a witness, watch you fill out your ballot and also sign your ballot, is that going to be something that is going to be in place in November? And so we're hoping that through this lawsuit, we're able to kind of know what the restrictions are, what's the plan, and what are the rules that we need to organize around, know those systems sooner rather than later. So people know, okay, I do need to request my ballot by this date. It does need to be postmarked by election day, and making sure that those restrictions are solid and they don't change, the deadlines don't move, I think that's really what caused a lot of confusion. And so I think one, the sooner we can have a little bit more clarity of what the process and those restrictions are, the better. And then I think it's just, full steam ahead. I think everybody, every elected official should be using their office resources to be able to get out the word to their constituents. I think there needs to be a robust educational campaign. I think people need to invest in ads digitally. The city and the election commission, they need to, find targeted ways to reach people. Different things like mail and radio, which I think some people may think are a little bit outdated as we're all moving digitally. Now that we're all at home, mail and digital or mail and radio actually may be things that we need to kind of revisit and go back to and make a priority. Even being able to see if we can print out flyers with a QR code that'll take you to how to request a ballot and put those flyers in gas stations or in grocery stores, and some of those essential businesses that we know are going to remain open. I think we need to use every tactic at our disposal, not just, calling a press conference and hope people have watched it, but making sure there's intentional mailings. We're making sure there's targeted digital ads. We're doing everything that we can. I don't care if people need to stand on the corner in sandwich boards saying, hey, request a ballot at this website at an intersection. I think people need to do everything that they can to let people know what the process will be, because it's going to be different from what happened in April. And it's also going to be different from what people are used to. And the earlier we can get those deadlines and restrictions kind of on paper and solidified, the better we are able to educate people as soon as possible.
And there are some statistics showing that communities of color are less likely to use mail voting in some states than white voters. So do you see more of an openness among Black voters in Milwaukee, for example, to vote by mail in the past? And if they have concerns about mail voting, that they might not get their ballots or that their ballots might not be counted, what are you saying to them about that?
Yeah, I think more and more people are open to the idea. I think just given the current world that we're living in, we're in the midst of a global pandemic still. And so I think people who may not have felt comfortable, putting a ballot in the mail and hoping it, reaches its destination, I think just because of the current situation, people are open to it a little bit more. People are still skeptical though. And so one of the things that we're also looking to have are different drop box locations. So people can just drop off their ballot, doesn't need to go through the postal system, and find different ways to be creative in that way. But also too, we want to make sure that people are able to stay safe. And we also know that there's going to be in-person polling places as well. And so letting people know all of their options and how to do so safely. I was able to actually vote, early vote in March before they shut down the polling places. I voted on March 17th, a couple of days before they shut it down. And the practices were very sanitary. It was very, clean. It was very, I was very comfortable. Granted, it was very, very early on when things started to shut down here in Wisconsin. But I think people know that they're going to do whatever they can to vote. And, we've talked to people, whether they were my age or they were in their 70s, they're regular voters. And they said, I had to sit this election out. My ballot never came. So we're asking people, again, request your ballot as early as possible, because there are some people that missed the election in April and were very, very upset about it, but are making plans now and say, you know what, I'm not going to let that happen again. I don't care if I need to walk a mile to my polling place or whatever it is. I'm going to make sure that I'm voting in November. So I think people are trying to figure out what works best for them, that they feel the most confident in. And people are really putting plans in place now to make sure that they don't miss another election.
Yeah, one thing I saw that's being done that seems like a good thing is the Wisconsin Election Commission is going to send absentee ballot requests to nearly all registered voters. So how do you think that's going to help people vote by mail, and would you like to see more of that kind of thing being done across the country?
Yeah, I think it takes away, one step. If we can find a way to make it as easy as possible to vote, that's what we should do. And if people are able to get something mailed to them, so people even know and have that information, I think it's a win. I would love to just, have a ballot mailed to every single person. I would love to see that universally, but understanding logistics and costs and whatnot. So people are trying to figure out the best way to make this work in really unprecedented times where people weren't able to plan for this accordingly. But I would want to see all across the country being able to find ways to make it as easy as possible. Can we, send that to every single person? Can we send a voter registration form to as many people as possible? again, I think we really need to get creative. And if we pride ourselves in having such a robust democracy, we really need to do everything that we can to make it easy and accessible for everyone. And we shouldn't be, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but we shouldn't be making voting hard if we claim to, be this really great democracy. If we're having people jump through hoops or having to make the choice between voting in person and making sure that their voice is heard or staying safe, people shouldn't have to make that choice. And we want to make sure that every single person understands like what they can do if it's, I need to vote in person because I don't really trust this, but I'm going to put mechanisms in place and I'm going to go to this polling place. Instead of having just 5, as you mentioned, having as many as possible and starting to plan for poll workers now so we can have as many as possible so we aren't seeing those long lines, so we aren't seeing people packed into gyms and into high schools that can actually make the pandemic actually worse. So we need to do everything we can. I want us to see, just sweeping voter registration forms mailed to people, making it as easy as possible. And it really shouldn't be a partisan political issue. We're not telling people who to vote for, but everybody who has the ability to vote in this country should understand the process to do so in a safe way under these conditions.
When people ask me, what can I do as a citizen to get involved? I always recommend that they request a mail ballot early and send it back early if they're going to vote by mail. I always recommend that they vote early if they're going to vote in person. As you said, the lines are usually much shorter when you vote early. I'm encouraging people to be poll workers now because we're going to need a lot more election officials to both help count mail ballots or to work the polls. What are you telling people when they ask you what they can do?
Yeah, the biggest thing right now is making sure that we're having conversations with everybody. Again, if we're not able to be out in the field and just, knock on a door and have that face-to-face conversation, we want to make sure that everyone is still reaching out to their own friends and family. Does everybody has 10 people that they know that they can call or even just like shoot a text message and say, hey, don't forget to request your ballot. I just did it. It's super easy. Even for me, when I went to go early vote back in March, I took a quick video and let people know how quick and easy it was, how sanitary it was. I was in and out in a handful of minutes. And I think being able to let people know how simple it can be once you actually learn and understand the process, but having that person help you navigate that process. Can we have that buddy that's like, I'm going to take on 10 to 15 people and I'm going to text them, once or twice a week to make sure that they know exactly what they need to do. And then I'm going to have those people text 10 of their friends, kind of having this really big phone tree at the end of the day. I think we need to get creative in how we're getting out information. And there's no way to oversaturate, I think, given the current circumstances. So if people are getting that touch from their friend a couple times a week, or if they're getting that touch from a political party or a candidate, or even like their family over a dinner table, I think people need to get that information as much as possible and as often as possible too.
And they can join chat groups too.
Exactly.
Chats, right?
Yep. I have so many different group chats. People have reached out to me, Facebook message or, Twitter. People actually just ask me questions on Instagram, which is supposed to be like my safe space because it's only pictures. But, using every tool again in our toolbox and every resource that we have to have those individual conversations who may not be on the list because they may not be the regular voters. We want to make sure that someone is still at least being able to talk to them too.
If people want to find out more about the work you're doing, where can they go?
Yeah, so we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, Block by Block MKE. We have a website, blockbyblock.org, BLOCBY, block.org. And, people can send us an email through our website. They can also send us a message through our social media as well. We have our block agenda on our website that really talks about our values and our work. And so people can learn more either Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or on our website.
And if people want to find out more about the work I'm doing, they can follow me on Twitter at Ari Berman, or read me at motherjones.com, or find my book, Us The Ballot, wherever books are sold. Thank you so much, Angela. This was really great insight, and I know we will be talking to you between now and the election again about what's happening in Wisconsin and nationally. So please stay safe and stay well.
Thank you. You too.